Certain complex mystery cases require experienced and skillful crime scene investigators to solve. But often, even with good detective work, these cases remain unsolved for decades. There are a variety of factors for why investigators may never find answers in these creepy mysteries. Often, there's not sufficient DNA evidence to identify any particular culprit, and sometimes there were no witnesses to the crimes being investigated. Number 5. Actress Natalie Wood was born in 1938. She began her acting career as a child, appearing in Miracle on 34th Street as an 8-year-old before moving on to major roles in classic films, such as Rebel Without a Cause, West Side Story, and Bob and Carol in Ted and Alice. She was nominated for 3 Academy Awards and was one of the most promising actresses of her generation. But her life was cut short on November 29, 1981, when she passed away at the age of 43. Even 40 years later, there remains a significant mystery around the circumstances of Wood's death, and whether foul play may have been involved. In November of 1981, Wood was filming Brainstorm, a movie with Christopher Walken that would have been her comeback role. But during a break, she took a weekend boat trip to Santa Catalina Island off the coast of Southern California. The boat belonged to her husband, the actor Robert Wagner. Wagner was on board along with Wood, Walken, and the boat's captain. According to Wagner's comments at the time, he went to bed on the evening of the 28th while Wood was still up. The following morning at 8 a.m., Wood's body was recovered near a dinghy a mile from the boat, with bruises and abrasions. The coroner ruled the cause of death to be accidental drowning or hypothermia. But there's a reason to suspect the story is more complicated than that. For example, Wood's sister Lena claimed that Natalie was terrified of water and would have never taken a dinghy out herself. Doctors and forensic specialists have suggested that the injuries on Wood's body may have been inflicted prior to the drowning. In 2011, the captain of the boat publicly stated that Wood and Wagner had an argument on the evening before her death, after Wagner had gotten jealous of her flirting with Walken. He even claimed that when Wood had disappeared during the night, Wagner had prevented him from turning on searchlights and alerting the authorities. The following year, the cause of death on Wood's death certificate was changed from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. In February of 2018, the police finally named Wagner as a person of interest in the investigation. In the last few years, more details and testimonies have come out about the mysterious case, especially in Suzanne Finstad's 2020 biography, Natalie Wood. But without any kind of confession or a smoking gun that conclusively proves Wagner was responsible for his wife's death, there's been no significant progress. The mysterious case of Natalie Wood remains one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in Hollywood. Number 4. On January 2nd, 1935, a man named Artemis Ogletree checked into the hotel president in Kansas City, Missouri, using the name Roland T. Owen. He was taken to room 1046 with almost no belongings, but it would be his last week alive, and he was destined to become the subject of a mysterious case that needs to be heard. Later that first day, when a maid named Mary Soptic came inside to clean the room, Ogletree said that she could stay and clean. She later recalled noticing several strange details that came up throughout that week, like the man's consistent preference for keeping the shades drawn and the room very dim. When she came back with towels later that day, Ogletree was lying in bed with all of his clothes on. A cryptic note was on his bedside table that read, quote, "Don, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." This mysterious figure, known as Don, showed up again. The next morning during a cleaning, Soptic heard Ogletree answering the phone. "No, Don, I don't want to eat. I'm not hungry." Later that day, Soptic heard another man speaking loudly in Ogletree's room. The man turned her away when she offered fresh towels. Later that night, there were loud noises coming from the 10th floor, as if Ogletree were hosting a party. One recognizable street worker came in asking the elevator operator about room 1046, but Ogletree may not have been there that night. One city worker reported giving a ride to a man who had been beaten up around 11 p.m., matching the description of Ogletree. It was the following day that he lost his life. When a bellhop came to room 1046 to put the phone back on its hook, he found Ogletree injured and bound with a cord on the floor near the door. When a doctor asked Ogletree who did this to him, he said, quote, "Nobody," claiming that the injuries were caused by hitting his head on the bathtub. He succumbed to his injuries before he could answer any more questions. Over the following months, images of his face circulated around the country, and his mother eventually identified him as Artemis Ogletree, not Roland T. Owen. There are many mysterious aspects to this case. Some suspect organized crime was involved, especially because the name Don can be a mafia boss title. Others think it was a personal attack, perhaps because he had an affair while engaged to someone else. In one eerie twist, Ogletree's mother said that she'd continued to receive letters from her son after he had passed away, though they didn't sound like her son. To this day, the mysterious figure of Don has never been identified, and the case has gone cold. Number 3. In 1935, the owner of Coogee Aquarium and Swimming Baths in Sydney, Australia, caught a 14-foot tiger shark and put it in the pool to attract customers. But a horrifying event occurred a week after the shark was caught. One day, while families were watching the shark, it began to convulse. Then it spat up several objects, including a rat and a bird. But the most disturbing thing that came out of the shark was a human arm. No other human remains were found inside the shark, but the arm was traced back to Jimmy Smith, a 45-year-old man who had been missing. But this creepy case became even creepier when it was discovered that Smith had not lost his arm from a shark attack. His arm had been removed prior to being eaten. This kicked off a full-blown murder investigation. It led the police to 2 other men Smith had worked with in insurance scams, one of whom the police later figured out he was blackmailing. That man's name was Reginald William Lloyd Holmes, but Smith was last seen playing cards with his other partner, Patrick Francis Brady, after he told his wife he would be fishing. Police suspected that it was at this partner's cottage that Smith was killed. Holmes confirmed that story, claiming Brady had left Smith's remains in a trunk and thrown it in the Guatemala Bay. He also claimed Brady had shown him Smith's arm and threatened him before throwing the arm in the surf. In the same month as Holmes's cooperation, however, he too lost his life. He was found the same morning that he was set to give evidence at Smith's inquest. Without his critical testimony, there was no longer a case against Brady, and he was acquitted. Fascinatingly, he maintained for the remaining 30 years of his life that he had no connection to the loss of Smith. To this day, the case of Jimmy Smith remains unsolved. The rest of his remains have never been recovered, so it's technically possible that he may have fled and survived somewhere years after the attack that left him without an arm. If he was indeed killed, the culprit has never been found. Number 2. One of the creepiest mysteries of the 21st century is what happened to Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. On March 8, 2014, an airplane full of 239 passengers and crew members was flying from Malaysia to China. But around 40 minutes after takeoff, communications with air traffic control ended and the plane disappeared from radar screens. Military radar continued to track the plane for an hour as it veered off course before disappearing from radar range entirely. A high-scale search for the plane began, and it became the most expensive in the history of aviation. Several witnesses claimed to see the missing plane. Some debris was found in the following years in the Western Indian Ocean, but otherwise, multiple searches have failed to recover the plane or any of the bodies. Many theories appeared in the weeks after the disappearance. Some thought a hijacking had occurred, perhaps involving members of the crew, though it seemed unlikely based on where the plane was flying when it was lost. The plane's captain became a main suspect for US officials investigating the disappearance, though there was no real evidence found to confirm this. Much evidence points to hypoxia, meaning passengers may have gradually lost oxygen and lost consciousness due to decompression without noticing. The Malaysian government was criticized for providing inaccurate and incomplete information in their response to the flight disappearance. To this day, there remain many questions about where exactly the plane is located and why it went off course. It's been described as one of the biggest mysteries in modern aviation history. Number 1. Sam Shepard and Marilyn Reese got married in 1945, but their love story came to a disturbing end on the weekend of July 3, 1954. That night, the two were hosting neighbors at their home when Sam fell asleep in the living room. Marilyn walked the neighbors out. Marilyn was attacked in the early morning hours in her bedroom by an unknown assailant, while Sam slept in the other room. He later claimed to have run upstairs and seen his wife being attacked by a white form with bushy hair before being knocked unconscious himself. Upon waking, he chased the same figure out of his house and fought with the figure on the beach, losing consciousness once again. Sam became the prime suspect for the loss of his wife, being the only one allegedly there at the time besides their sleeping child. The investigation attracted an extreme amount of publicity, with certain groups and even newspapers calling for Sam's arrest. However, during his trial, Sam's attorney pointed out Sam's severe injuries that he could not have inflicted on himself. These included a cervical concussion and a nerve injury. Then Sam took the stand to defend himself and described the form with a light garment that he encountered. Sam was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, but the story wasn't over there. F. Lee Bailey, the famed defense attorney who would later work on O.J. Simpson's Dream Team, became Sam Shepard's new chief counsel and submitted appeals. Eventually, on June 6, 1966, the Supreme Court struck down the conviction, citing the carnival atmosphere of the trial. During the retrial, Bailey described the case against Shepard as 10 pounds of hogwash in a 5-pound bag. He was found not guilty. Shepard himself passed away in 1970 from liver failure, but one last piece of evidence cleared his name when he was exhumed for DNA testing in 1997. There was DNA from a third person at the scene of the crime. However, while other suspects have come up over the years, investigators have never been able to identify that third person. Perhaps we'll never know for sure who is responsible for the death of Marilyn Shepard and who ruined her husband's life. Or perhaps the truth is simple, and after all this time, Sam himself really was the culprit. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.